So we have 100 days. We have a lot to look at, and the president was real pumped up after his appearance last night in Michigan. We also have some breaking news on the economy, which is not welcome news for the Trump team, and I'll bring it up to Bret in a moment. But let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
Who's going to put out this fire? The opposition is important, but what's the proposition? What are Democrats offering besides, outrage to Donald Trump and Elon Musk?
That is Van Jones. Dems trying to find their footing. They have Kamala today in a major speech that'll cost you, and ABC indicates they're ready for a major move. The problem? They're fueled by AOC, I should say. They are fueled by one thing: hatred of Trump. How's that working for you?
Number 2.
Vice President Vance was in India last week, so I could see some announcements on India. I could see the contours of a deal with the Republic of Korea coming together.
So the Republic of Korea could be the deal, and we hear India could be next. And man, the economy needs that. The beautiful bill is in markup now as Trump turns up the heat on would-be Republican heretics. Meanwhile, tariffs are taking a toll. What the president is closing in on multiple deals, as you just heard.
Number 1.
Donald Trump's first 100 days have been 100 days from hell.
Okay, I guess he's not for them. Tale of 200-day report cards. Trump says it's been heaven. As you heard, Chuck Schumer thinks it's hell. I say buckle up for the next 100 because Trump is ready to really, really rock the world in major ways. But this is not good news. This just came across. The U.S. GDP, adjusted for inflation, declined 0.3%. Now, it was 2.4 last quarter. It's to 0.3% now, minus for the first 3 months of the year. The Commerce Department said this Wednesday. It was on the surface a stunning reversal from the growth, but the first quarter figure was misleading. The results of quirks in the way economic activity is measured. More reliable data on consumer spending and business investment suggested the growth slowed in the first quarter, but remained fundamentally solid. Bottom line is, that's a number Democrats are going to run with. Bret Baier, whose enterprising attitude had him saying hello to the president on his turf yesterday, knowing that he'd be tossing to his speech. He's the chief political anchor of Fox News. Bret, I saw you. What was it like to be part of the White House press corps yesterday?
Yeah, it was like the old job, It was good. I figured I wanted to do the show from the White House as the backdrop, and there really had to be a reason to do that because we knew he was going to be in Michigan delivering that speech, and likely it was going to hit in our hour. So I went to the White House for the departure and got to ask him a few questions.
And you knew
so it was good.
You also knew if you saw him that he would go to you, right?
Yeah. I thought so. I mean, and it did work out that way. So, but they were very accommodating, letting me go in there, and it did bring me back to the old days. It was George W. Bush I was yelling at back then, but yeah, it was fun. Multiple
wars at that point. So, Bret, what's your reaction to this number? That's not going to be good news for the president.
No, it's not. That's not a great number in any way, shape, or form. And you're right, Democrats will jump on that right away. A lot of it has to do with, reaction to the tariffs and that there are so many balls in the air, as you just heard from the Treasury Secretary. They need some deliverables on deals to be blueprints for how other countries are going to make deals. And so that's not realized yet, and I think that's the limbo we're in as the slowing happens in the economy.
This is what the explanation is from The Economist and the New York Times. Say consumer spending slowed in the first quarter, growing at 1.8%, down from 4% at the end of last year. But economists said that there was at least in part because of harsh winter storms that hit the southern part of the state. Obviously, North Carolina is still recovering. There is little sign so far that the steep drop in consumer sentiment that began shortly after Trump took office has yet translated into a pullback in actual spending. But that number is not good. Do you think this creates an urgency to announce more deals?
Well, I think there was already pressure to do that. I think, the market is hungry for some kind of concrete deal. You can only say we're closing in on a big trade deal so many times, and then it's like the, Chicken Little. I think, they're ready to do that. I'm told there's just dissension inside about what exactly each deal should look like. And so there may be a split between the Lutnicks and the Bessents and the Navarros and the Greers, the USTR, which, by the way, I'm going to be at the trade reps agency today and do an interview with him, Jameson Greer.
Oh, he'll be on your show tonight?
Yeah. So we're taking the show on the road. We're doing it from USTR.
All right, here is Scott Bed, the Treasury Secretary yesterday, cut 22.
Vice President Vance was in India last week. I think that he and Modi made some very good progress. So I could see some announcements on India. I could see the contours of a deal with the Republic of Korea coming together. And then we've had substantial talks with the Japanese. I think that we are very close on India.
All right, so really close on India. And then I know that J.D. Vance already made progress also with the president of Italy about the EU. So that would be next. As Kevin O'Leary said this morning or yesterday morning, he said if you get India, you get Japan, you get the EU, that's 70% of what you need. The other countries, no disrespect, just don't have that a major pull. And I think now maybe you just come up with a template for what you need. Here's the figures they were. This is what we need. This is what we got, and sign this. And the markets might respond. Any indication that China's buckling?
No, and that's a big, big question. Is will they feel the pinch if you get these other deals? India, Japan, South Korea. EU seems a little bit further off, but maybe it would put increasing pressure on China. A part of those deals have to do with, increasing U.S. interaction and decreasing interaction between those countries and China. And, there would really be a pinch. The question is how long China can hold out. They import a lot, and their economy is really, really hurting right now in the wake of all of this.
I want you to see, yes, I find it so interesting. It does not surprise me that my sound sheet is littered with Democrats who think Trump is the worst thing in the world. What time is it? It's every day. But I also find it when Fetterman speaks out, when Joe Manchin used to be out there, because they're more issue to issue. Now, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, I want to get your take on this. She shows up in the Oval Office. She said after the election, President Trump is popular in Michigan. I'm going to work with him when I can. Then she showed up in the Oval Office, famously put her folder over her face, did not know cameras were coming in, but didn't back off, had fun with it. And then yesterday, when it was announced he was going to go to a National Guard base and announced the A-10 Warthog was going to be sidelined and they were getting new planes in as requested by her, she showed up. And then Trump said, hey, why don't you say a few words? Cut 26.
Well, I hadn't planned to speak, but I'm on behalf of all the military men and women who serve our country and serve so honorably on behalf of the state of Michigan. I am really damn happy we're here to celebrate this recapitalization at Selfridge. It's crucial for the Michigan economy. It's crucial for the men and women here, for our homeland security and our future. So thank you. I'm so grateful that this announcement was made today, and I appreciate all the work.
So is there going to be backlash, you think?
Probably. Knowing how the Democratic Party eats their own on the left, there probably will be. I saw a clip the other day, someone going on, a Democratic senator, I think it was Ruben Gallego, had voted for some ambassador in the Trump, nomination, and was getting grilled about why he voted for that person. So I think there will be, and she may feel that. But, notice it wasn't overwhelming as far as thanking President Trump in her remarks. She was pretty calculated. It wasn't exactly a folder in front of her face, but it was close to it.
But I think it's interesting. You have the oligarchy tour, which makes no sense, but they get big crowds. I don't think socialism or Bernie Sanders is the future of the party. Not many other experts feel that way. And then David Hogg comes out and says, I'm going to primary people I don't feel are effective, and he gets backlash from Ken Martin, the director, and others. So there's some friction there. And then you wonder if this is not the right path. Because Rahm Emanuel he's not eviscerating Trump. He has more of a up-the-middle approach anyway. So that's much different. As Democrats try to find their footing, I'm not sure anybody should be afraid of any backlash anywhere. Find out what the American people think. Don't worry about what, people on your party think.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think all the focus right now on AOC and Bernie Sanders, at J.B. Pritzker, saying that there should be mass protests against President Trump and the Trump administration. I think those are all, just seeking oxygen and trying to be the loudest voice in the room. In the end, by the time we get to the choosing, the party, Democratic Party choosing which way forward, I would venture a guess there are some moderate choices, the Wes Moores, the folks who are going to try to reach across the aisle at some point in their pitch. So we got a long way to go.
Big, beautiful bill. How long away did that have to go? The speaker says the markup went really well yesterday by all accounts. Didn't even take them till midnight that they thought it would, as all the committees, all 12 committees were working to try to get something together in the House to offer to the Senate, and then they got to collaborate on one, not expecting any Democrat support. Question is, how many Republicans will they lose? Here's Speaker Johnson yesterday, cut 31.
We are on track to pass the bill out of the House, as we've said from the very beginning, and get it over to the next stage by Memorial Day. Now, I don't know how long the Senate's going to take to do their piece, but I was very encouraged after the meeting yesterday, frankly.
So do you think Memorial Day, from the people you talked to, Bret Baier, is possible?
Yeah, out of the House. I don't think it's all locked up by then, but I think it's sent over. And listen, you've got to give it to Speaker Johnson, who has pulled a rabbit out of many hats. When people said there's no way he's going to hold these votes together, and he has. And obviously you have to give President Trump and the White House credit as well. But I think it's heading that way. We don't have the specifics yet. And there's going to be some anxiety along the way. But I do think that this tariff situation and even that number of the shrinking economy today may force some hands to move forward, that they need that growth agenda.
All right, Bret. And what was it like talking to the Washington Commanders owner? They're going to be thrilled to get that stadium closer to a metropolis like D.C., right?
Yeah, it's a big deal. I think it's not baked in the cake. They still have to get through the D.C. Council, but I think that they're on their way, and I think it would be really big for the city and for the region. Obviously, Commanders fans, it's a big change to have it, here.
I tell you, Bret, you lived it, but I had to drive there for the Army-Navy game. It's the middle of nowhere. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, what were they thinking?
Yeah. It's amazing. And you sit there in traffic, forever. And it's tough to get to. It just seemed that, RFK, that positioning is really easy. And the thing that's really going to change the dynamic is all the development around it. Josh Harris talked about the restaurants and a boardwalk along the water. And, it's a big thing for the city.
Just keep in mind in New York, they promised that with the Islanders, and we're still waiting. They built the stadium, and then they kind of wait on the other stuff. Bret, thanks so much. Look forward to your, believe it or not, extremely impactful interview with Jameson Greer, because the whole world will be watching, because we want to find out what's the latest with the tariff drama. Bret Baier, thank you.
See ya.
The other change for Belichick is 24-year-old Jordan Hudson, his creative muse, as he writes in his book. Jordan was a constant presence during our interview.
You have Jordan right over there. Everybody in the world seems to be following this relationship. They've got an opinion about your private life. It's got nothing to do with them, but they're invested in it. How do you deal with that?
Never been too worried about what everybody else thinks. Just try to do what I feel like is best for me and what's right.
How did you guys meet?
Not talking about this.
No?
No.
So that was the story on CBS when Bill Belichick, attempting to sell his book on winning, was shut down by the 24-year-old girlfriend of Bill Belichick, now head coach of the University of North Carolina. Relationship expert and network anchor Martha MacCallum joins us now from the story. Analyze that exchange.
First of all, I think that just watching Bill Belichick promote a book is a painful experience because he doesn't like to talk.
I know.
He doesn't want to elaborate on anything. He doesn't want to say I got this great little story I want to share with you. It's just an anecdote from my book. One time, Tom Brady and I, whatever. No, it's so painful for him. And when the reporter was pressing him on why there's not one mention of Robert Kraft, even in the acknowledgments. He was like, it was like watching a post-Patriots press conference. He's like, nope.
Yeah. Didn't include him. Had to cut it out. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it wasn't in there. Nope. Right. And then she pipes up, and it is just, I mean, it's just very weird. The whole thing is very weird. I'm not sure that the entire country is spending a lot of time thinking about their relationship, as the reporter suggested on the way into the question, but it is what it is.
So the University of North Carolina says they're concerned because they say that she is everywhere. She's handling his appearances, handling where he's going.
It doesn't usually turn out well, does it?
Never.
I'm thinking about the woman that Tiger Woods was dating for a while, and people said the same thing about her.
Yeah.
That she was always around, that she was always involved and sort of like hanging on to the whole situation. I think that generally doesn't turn out too well.
Martha, the other thing is, like, you see Bill Belichick in odd poses. She's dressed as a mermaid and he's fishing.
How weird is that?
Nothing weirder, ever. Nothing weird.
And he's like, oh, I don't really look at it. I don't really look at it. Like she's like, come on, I'm dressed up like a mermaid and you can pretend like you're reeling me in, and then I'm going to put it all over social media. I mean, whatever. Whatever they're into, but to have that be part of the book promo, probably not too helpful.
Well, put it this way: does he do another interview for it? I mean, he gets money. You know what it's like. You have a book out. You got to promote it.
You do have to promote it, but she's clearly the media manager. And I don't know how much experience she has, but she thinks that when she pipes up in the middle of it, that means they're going to cut that part out. Hello? That is not how it works.
Right.
She's like, no, we're not going to talk about that. She's not thinking this is what's going to be viral, but of course it is. So that was a big lesson for her.
The other thing is, it's people who watched him not say words for years and be the toughest guy, taking on a 6'8", 320-pound lineman who shows up late. He'll confront him and rugged and cut players on the spot. All of a sudden, you see him knuckle under a 24-year-old who knows nothing about life. It doesn't even matter.
Oh, men do that all the time.
Huh? You mean a 24-year-old man controlling women?
No, I'm just saying, it's sort of like, what's that saying? There's no fool like an old fool. I don't know. I mean,
do people say that?
In general?
Oh.
Sure.
Oh.
There's no fool like an old fool. You never heard that?
No, I never really heard that.
Really?
Yeah.
That's because you're not an old fool yet. But,
I hope not.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's something fairly predictable about it. And, I know, remember at the Brady roast, they were all ribbing him about this relationship.
But here's the other thing that's interesting. Is like when you have this focus, he's like a genius, and he spends most of his time in the film room, not interacting with people, working 18 hours a day. So what happens is it's like the Tiger Woods imbalance. You only do one thing your whole life, and at some point you pick your head up and you go, wow, not only I'm not really good socially, but I'm famous. And I'm rich, and other people just come in, and you have no way of judging people's motives or what they're up to, or you don't have that
like the social skills
experience.
Are not really there. And you're right.
Street smart.
He's a genius coach, and I loved watching him coach the Patriots all those years. The relationship that he had with Tom Brady was extraordinary. So this is a historic, fantastic. Well. But it was productive. Yes. I mean, incredibly productive. So they were doing something right? They had an incredible relationship in that way, and it produced amazing football. I loved that clip that they played of when they played against the Falcons and came back, scored 21 points in like the last whatever it was 5 minutes or something. But and I don't mean to be. If they're happy, more power to them, and I hope they are. I hope they live happily ever after. But if she can't pipe up in the middle of it and not have the rest of us to go, oh, okay, now we're going to talk about it because it brought it out there for everyone to see.
I mean, we put the request in to interview him. I mean, I have a lot of legitimate questions. I might not focus on the social part of it. I really don't care that much.
Is this your pitch? Please come here.
Yes, if he's listening right now.
And she could come with him and sit right here next to where I'm sitting right now.
As long as we keep the camera on all of us.
I think it'd be very interesting.
That would probably be even more interesting.
Absolutely.
Right.
I hope he does that with you.
Well, what's going to be interesting is because Bob Kraft and he obviously are on the outs. That's one thing.
Yeah.
So
more so than we knew, I guess.
And he said, well, Bob Kraft said he fired you. And he said, no, I quit. Because I know he said he fired you.
He said we parted ways.
Yeah, we parted ways. So that's a huge difference. And now it looks like Parcells and Bob Kraft have made up.
Right. So now the book promo interview has become about his 24-year-old girlfriend interjecting and reeling him in a way that most men, I don't think, would find
You know, it's almost as bad. Alec
and then
Baldwin.
it's about him saying he was fired.
Eric, do you have the one with
the
Alec Baldwin on the red carpet? This is terrible. By the way, this is on the heels of another story. I'm doing Outnumbered at the top of the hour. I think I'm going to be the man. You never know. And one of the stories is Amal Clooney and George Clooney in an interview, and say evidently she could be banned from this country for her role as one of 8 members of the International Criminal Court who voted to indict Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister, Gallant. And she could be banned from the country. And then as I'm researching this, I see this story. George Clooney says he and his wife have never had a fight in over 10 years of marriage. Is that possible?
Not in my house, but it might be possible in their house, and more power to them if that's true. They always look pretty happy. But yeah, that seems like a bit of a stretch, doesn't it? I mean, does that mean like over anything? Over like, oh, are you going to wear that tie? You know what I mean? Like nothing? Or does he mean, just like a huge blowout fight?
They just don't have a fight. If you don't have a fight, I don't think you're in a real relationship, because that means you're like, it's in the dating stage still, like when you're looking to put your best. And if you're doing that, that's never going to work. I just
love everything you do, and you love everything I do.
Right.
And
I'm afraid of being the one to blow it.
Yeah, exactly.
Until you realize you're in. The other story, I only caught the tail end of it, but evidently there's this new trend that is being introduced where marriage could be like a couple of contracts, like a 4-year contract. Instead of a lifetime contract, a 4-year contract. Do you think that could ever work, where people will be more on their toes because they know they could be renewed or not be renewed?
No, I mean, I'm a Catholic. I got married in a Catholic church. It's a forever agreement. It is not a 4-year agreement. It's a vow. You take a vow to love someone and cherish them for the rest of your life. I think the 4-year agreement plan is just a totally different version of it than I would ever.
What if you take a vow for 4 years?
No. It's a life. It's like swans, they mate for life.
Oh, is that true?
Swans mate for life. That's why you always see 2 of them, together on the pond.
But like, how do they meet? I mean, is it arranged? Is like the first swan you see?
I don't know.
This is a fantastic conversation. By the way, the cabinet meeting is starting with the President of the United States, puts on his own show every day. Fresh off his show at night, he has his own show with his cabinet. This is his 3rd one. And we're looking at what's going on right now. So, Russia, Ukraine, we talked in real life about in the break on this. Mm-hmm. I'm concerned, like you sound like you may be concerned, that we might be laying the groundwork to walk away. I think this could be if Zelensky ends up dead and Kyiv ends up falling and we walked away, this will be his version of Afghanistan. Even though he didn't start when he was there. It started actually when Biden was there as senator, but Afghanistan.
Well, you can sense Secretary of State Rubio, who's sitting right next to the president right now live as they do this cabinet meeting, said several days ago, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe we don't get the ceasefire. We're working as hard as we can, but maybe we don't. Maybe it doesn't happen. And obviously it was something that the president said could be handled in a few days. And then you had Susie Wild in the interview with the New York Post say something similar, that we can make the absolute best effort we can make, but if they want to keep killing each other, then that's the way it's going to be. What hasn't really been articulated is what kind of terms, what would our support look like, and really understanding what happened between Zelensky and Trump in the Vatican the other day, and hopefully a move towards some peace and some assurances of some kind of security for Ukraine. But there's a lot of huge question marks around this right now.
Right now, Lavrov says we want the world to recognize Crimea and the 20% of Ukraine that we've taken. He names all the provinces. And then he also he wants to make sure they're disarmed. Wants to disarm Ukraine. That's never good. None of this stuff is going to happen.
Smaller military.
Yeah, smaller military, if not totally disarmed. And Lavrov says that he explained that to Witkoff. Mm-hmm. Witkoff didn't say anything about that when he came out. So you're either stabbing him in the back. Witkoff is not somebody I don't think is playing that game. I'll tell American people the opposite of what happened. So I hope people realize what we realized really through George W. Bush, that we can't be trusted. He's got to be in a point where it's in his best interest to stop fighting. And the only way to do that is to continue to arm up massively Ukraine. He's already lost 900,000 plus off the battlefield, dead or wounded. And that's the only thing he seems to understand, Martha.
I don't know what makes Putin stop in his tracks at this point. I think he feels perhaps that he can get what he wants. He can get Crimea. He can get the 20% that they've been holding. There's been very little forward movement over the course of this war, even from the very early days. So I think that's why I think this meeting between Zelensky and Trump at the Vatican probably raised a lot of questions. And I think it may have been President Trump's way of saying, look, you're not going to keep bombing Ukraine. We're supposed to be working towards a ceasefire. And if you do, I'm going to try to figure out I'm going to maybe figure out another alliance, another way forward here.
The other thing, Martha, is, as you know, the president's taking political risk and political hits by giving Vladimir Putin a fresh start, saying we'll give you a problem with the economy. And I thought Putin would have recognized that and wouldn't have made the president look so bad. If it ends now, the way it ends, where it's heading, he makes the president look terrible. He's going to hold a grudge on that. And this was his chance to have economic development with anybody of.
But I mean, think absolutely, I agree with you, Brian. Think about the irony here. The entire Russiagate catastrophe of the first term, and the suggestion that that Putin was in Trump's back pocket, right, all along.
Yes.
And Trump was always stronger on giving Ukraine support. He gave Ukraine way more support than they ever got from Biden or from Obama. But now it's getting to a point where I think that the gig may be up, and I think that the choice that the United States makes may have to be to continue to support Ukraine.
I like the way you did that, because we outlined 3 stories that are cliffhangers to only be continued on your show at 3 o'clock on Fox
General
News
Keith
Channel.
Kellogg will ask him the questions about where all this is going.
And then he'll answer, won't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
All
We're
right.
not going to let him off the hook.
Let's go to Karl Rove right now, former Deputy Chief of Staff, great friend of the show to George W. Bush. And you know that he writes for the Wall Street Journal on a weekly basis. Karl, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. And wait a minute, you said 1211 Avenue of the Americas? I thought Fox News was located at 535 East 58th Street. I thought that was the address. For all of the people who are listening who want to protest, it's 538 East 58th.
Good. Way to go. I mean, Karl, you must deal with that a lot, right? Especially when you were with the Bush administration. You're trying to live your life, and then people think they have to give their opinion on the job you're doing, and it's negative. How do you deal with that?
Well, that's their right, but it irritated me when they tried to, surround my house and pound on my windows when I had a 10-year-old inside. So
yeah.
That's that was more than just a little irritating, but we have a right of free speech here, and if we disagree, fine. But if we could find a less disagreeable way to disagree, it would be good for our country.
I hear you. So, how do you feel about the president's tactic of letting the cameras come in and ask questions in these cabinet meetings, and also almost speaking 2 or 3 times a day?
Yeah, it's a high wire act. It's really, because he's sort of tossing control of that day's message to whatever question the press wants to throw at him, but he's comfortable with it, and he's carried it off pretty well. There's one thing that's going to be problematic. He sometimes gets things stuck in his head. Because somebody told him or somebody showed him something, and once it gets stuck there, he can get into a battle that he's not ultimately going to win. For example, somebody showed him a picture of the Marylander who got sent to El Salvador with MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles. Well, it's a completely photoshopped fake picture, but the president was shown it. Nobody said, "Hey, this is not real." It got sort of stuck in there, and sometimes he gets stuck in those kind of situations. And be better to be a little bit more. Let's just say unwilling to accept at first blush anything that's thrust in front of him.
I know you're not like Steve Moore. Steve Moore, not a fan of the tariffs, looking for to resolve it. You're not a fan of the tariffs and the restructuring of trade all at once. So the market didn't like the GDP, which was minus 3%. Even though they got into detail, when you have a whole bunch of imports, it throws off the number on the total on the GDP. Having said all that, do you think that makes Trump and the Treasury Secretary Bessent want to change the speed or the number of exemptions on the deals coming forward? It looks like South Korea is set to be announced, followed by India. Does that change anything?
I think it will, as long as what the agreements say to the American people are, we're not going to be paying higher prices when we go to outfit our kids or to make a purchase. Remember, look, one of the big difficulties facing the previous president, Joe Biden, was he went out there in 2021, 22, 23, and 24 and said Bidenomics is working. And the American people didn't feel it because they saw it in their life when they went to the grocery store, when they went to work, when they looked at their paycheck, tried to stretch it to pay the bills, went and filled the car up with gas. Same thing now because, look, Americans are working in this economy. And so when they go to work and somebody says, you know what, you're in an auto plant and we're now going to have to pay 25% tariff or a 50% tariff on something on a component that we import from Canada or Mexico, you know it's going to be reflected in the final price of the product you're selling, and you know it's going to cause some people to say, well, I want to find something cheaper, or maybe I just won't buy a new car now. And so And that feeds throughout the entire economy. We all feel this. I mean, it's not that the only people who know what's going on in a business are the people in the CEO's office. It's people on the floor. And so the president's got to be very careful in my mind of sort of dismissing people's concerns. I noticed in the NBC interview, it was like, everything's going to turn out all right. Well, we want to hear that reassurance, but back it up. And that's why these initial tariff deals are so critical. We need to be able to walk away from them and say, you know what? Vietnam lowered its tariffs and taxes on American goods and services to 5%. Therefore, 5% U.S. Okay, fine. We can live with that. But these 90% tariffs and 45% tariffs, American people aren't dumb. They know who's going to end up paying most of that, and it's them.
Here is the Treasury Secretary, cut 22.
Vice President Vance was in India last week. I think that he and Modi made some very good progress. So I could see some announcements on India. I could see the contours of a deal with the Republic of Korea coming together. And then we've had substantial talks with the Japanese. I think that we are very close on India.
So, obviously, he's not somebody to get into hyperbole. He's as right. Straight down the road as anybody, right?
Yes, and actually, ironically, for weird reasons, I have some knowledge of what's going on in two of those countries that he's talking about, and I think he's absolutely right. The U.S. is making serious progress with South Korea and Japan, in part because two things. One is their economies are tied to ours. I mean, they understand that high tariffs on American goods and high tariffs on their goods, are going to be problematic for their economies. And second of all, they realize that we need to, as a world, we face a difficult time, and they have made a decision. They want to be allied with the United States and not have to kowtow to China. And so they're looking to strengthen that relationship. And look, don't get me wrong. Some of this is inexplicable. The president says if we have a trade deficit, you're screwing us. You're being unfair to us. So why do we turn around and slap a tariff on countries with whom we have a surplus, like Great Britain and the Netherlands, or other countries? And why not take into account that we're selling not only goods, but we're also selling services, and those matter a lot in an economy like ours that increasingly more and more of it is derived from the sale of services. And so, he's got a chance to have some real successes here. He's going to have to deliver, and I think I'm really impressed with this trade, with the trading skills of the Secretary of the Treasury, and hopefully we'll have some good deals here shortly.
And Karl Rove, let me ask you, the answer might be I don't know, and that's what most people say. But when it comes to China, do you get the sense that they're feeling it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, the numbers on the collapse of their manufacturing economy here, they had a burst earlier in the year because. And when the president came in, people said, you know what, we better stock up our inventories. The latest GDP numbers, this blows my mind. There is a 22% in equipment spending. Clearly, that's being driven by companies saying we better spend on the equipment that we're buying from China and get it here quickly. That added 1.1 percentage points to the GDP number. But then we had a 2.3% point boost from inventory accumulation, but then we had a 5% decline in the GDP from the import surge So the real GDP is at a positive but tepid, 1.3 number, and I think that's going to weigh heavily on China, because China realizes they're no longer going to be able to pay those employees and millions of jobs in thousands of factories across China if they are not able to sell to the United States.
And Carl, the thing we have to learn from this, and we should have done it ahead of time clearly, is we got to get our own magnets, our own precious metals, our own rare earth. We have to find other places to refine it. We cannot count on them ever again. Pharmaceuticals already have to come back. Chips in Taiwan, if we're in the process of doing that, that's national security. That's different from trade. Don't tell me about profit. You bring them home for national security reasons, almost like the Defense Production Act in an emergency situation, because I believe China is, if I'm to read the reports, they'd be correct. China's already holding back magnets and metals.
Yeah, absolutely they are. And but here's one other thing that we better get our act together on. For the last 8 years, we've done nothing on the biggest problem we have dealing with China on trade issues. And what is that? That's the theft of intellectual property. If you want to sell into China, you have to have a Chinese partner who has access to your manufacturing and technology, even after that partnership ends. If you want to sell to the Chinese government, which is the biggest client in China, you have to manufacture in China. These are in violation of WTO rules. And both this president in his first term and Joe Biden in his term did nothing to undo these trading practices, which have accelerated since 2012 and the rise of Xi, the leader of China. So we ought to be getting the world community. You think the Brits like having their technology stolen, or the Indians, or the Japanese, so we ought to get the world united, go to the WTO and say, China, you made a series of commitments when you joined. You're not living up to them. Either live up to them or you're out.
Yeah, by the way, Messing is meeting with the IMF and WTO, and he's got a list of grievances, and I think he's got he's empowered to act. Lastly, something totally different on the media and the failings of Joe Biden that you wrote about, I've talked about, and it was obvious to all of us, and now people on the left are writing books trying to make money off Joe Biden's cognitive failings. Here's what Chuck Todd said when people come out and want to blame the media. Cut 37.
This is not a media failure. This is a failure of the Democratic Party. And I just sort of the virtue signaling that some people have done to try to say that the media missed this story. They didn't miss this story. No. David Ignatius wrote, I just refuse to accept this stupid premise because it's a manufactured right-wing premise in order to stain the media.
Right-wing premise? What is she talking about?
Yeah. Look, grow up. Accept the responsibility. The media were complicit in this. They were complicit. And we now know that the White House staff was misleading us. But I'm reading a couple of these books. I'm reading Uncharted by Whipple and Fight by Alan Parnas. And both of them talk about how members of the media say, we saw that he was in decline, but didn't write about it, didn't make it an issue. Some of them saw up close and personal or from sources that had knowledge that he was in bad shape and didn't talk about it. And look, if change the name. What if it was a Donald Trump or a George W. Bush or a Ronald Reagan? I mean, Reagan they wrote about. And
in real time,
the idea that the media was somehow doing its job with Joe Biden when he was hiding from the public. This goes back to his campaign, but certainly when he became president. Now they're admitting, yeah, we saw him in 2021 and 2022, and he was so different from where we had seen him in 2016, and obvious decline. And we heard about the fundraiser in 2023 where big donors were horrified. Well, why didn't you write about it? Why did it take June 27th of 2024 and a performance on a stage in front of tens of millions of Americans, which you could not deny, to finally shock you into covering the mental decline of the President of the United States?
I hear you. And listen to what Alex Thompson of Axios said at the Correspondents' Dinner.
President Biden's decline and its cover-up by the people around him is a reminder that every White House, regardless of party, is capable of deception. But being truth tellers also means telling the truth about ourselves. We, myself included, missed a lot of this story. And some people trust us less because of it.
Now, Here's the problem. And he wrote the other book. He wrote another book. It's about to come out with Jake Tapper of all people. They chose to miss the story. They knew the story was there. They chose not to write it. I guess he was better than most, but we were looked at as being cruel to old people by pointing out that he couldn't walk off a stage or across a lawn, that he couldn't walk up steps and had to change his shoes, and the way he leaves a plane, and the way he gets off stage, and then a guy dressed up in a rabbit outfit on Easter had to keep him away from the press, or it might have been a woman. Your final thought on this?
Ultimately, this is a responsibility of Joe Biden and the people around him, and they ill-serve the country. They ill-serve their own party. They hurt our country. The idea that he was going to run again for re-election was horrifying. But think back. It may have been that the fact that he ran in 2020 was the beginning of the problem. They knew back then that he was in decline. But to hide it from the American people and now say, well, yeah, we knew, we were horrified. I'm reading about the debate prep here. Well, you put him there, and you kept him there, and you hid him from us, and you misled us about him, and it hurt our country. Our country needs to have a strong, effective president, regardless of whether they're Republican or Democrat. And your man was not up to the job, and you hid it from the American people.
He did. And the thing is, they're trying to get a pass without ever admitting the whole Russia trumped-up hoax. You went through it to a degree with the Scooter Libby situation. And so that was this is all to the 100th power. And they just want to keep moving on and get their awards. It's crazy. I'm not perfect. At least I try to be.
Yeah, well, and there's one other thing, which is now they're saying, well, the president doesn't have the power to suspend this spending. He can't stop spending the money on the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and blah, 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 blah. These are the same people who said, oh, it's okay if the president takes $870 billion worth of taxpayer dollars in student loan monies and writes it off without a vote of Congress, because you know why? The White House says on background, we're doing this because we're worried about the youth vote in the midterms and the presidential election, and we think this will help us with younger voters. I mean, please.
Karl Rove, great points, as usual. I got you all fired up. Best of luck the rest of the day. You owe me for everything you achieved from here on in today. It's because you're on our show. Thanks, Karl Rove.
If this doesn't stop, the Ukrainians aren't winning the war. I think there's this weird idea among the mainstream media that if this thing goes on for just another few years, the Russians will collapse, the Ukrainians will take their territory back, and everything will go back to the way that it was before the war. That is not the reality that we live in.
So that is the Vice President of the United States. That's what his assessment of what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. Well, the chairman of the Institute of Study of War, four-star General Jack Keane, Fox News contributor, he's our senior strategic analyst, has his point of view, and he joins us now. General, what do you think about what the vice president said?
I think the Ukrainians do have opportunity to take some territory back by persistent counterattacks, but they have to be given increased lethality to do that. But in terms of driving the Russians completely out, I think that's unlikely. He's right about that. But what he hasn't said is the point that needs to be made, because there's an absolute false narrative out there that if the West continues to support Ukraine, Russia will not take control of Ukraine, period. We're 38 months into this war, and Russia has taken 20% of the territory, and most of that territory they had already owned before the invasion. So they have, when you think about it, 38 months. How much progress have they really made beyond 2014, when they already owned close to that 20%? It has not been operationally significant. Russia cannot take control of Ukraine if we continue to arm them and protract the war. That's where we're at. The problem we have is Zelensky and the people of Ukraine want to make peace. They have demonstrated that by removing any concessions for a 30-day ceasefire. Putin has rejected that 30-day ceasefire, thrown up all these phony ceasefires that have nothing to do with a quasi-permanent ceasefire, and are clearly demonstrating that they're not interested in really making a peace deal. And I think we've got to accept that and make attempts to force them into negotiations. Take the gloves off and let's start dealing with them realistically.
So General Chris Cavoli, commander of the U.S. forces in Europe, told the Senate committee this month that the Russian army, which has been borne the brunt of the combat, is today larger than it was at the beginning of the war. And they are beginning to expand their bases in their country. Danish intelligence warned that the Russians could launch a large-scale war in Europe within 5 years if it perceived NATO to be weak. Have they just gone full military economy and would be almost hurt them to stop this war because it's keeping them busy with jobs?
Yeah, so far, the people are supporting this. And a couple of reasons for that. Yes, to answer your first question, they have gone to a war footing economy. In other words, they have taken industries that normally produce commercial products, and they are doing what we did in World War II. They're making military items, not as sophisticated, as a tank, but making items that they need on the battlefield, and there's thousands of those items. Yes, and in the attitude of the people, while the economy has suffered, they're not impoverished as a result of it. It hasn't crippled them. Why? Because China and India have bailed them out, in terms of purchasing their oil and their gas. And they've had significant plus-ups from Iran, China, and North Korea in terms of military assistance. So their support has been pretty steady. And the other thing, Putin goes out of his way to make certain that he recruits from Central and Eastern Russia, not from Western Russia where the power structure is. And if a soldier dies on the battlefield, regardless of where the family is and regardless of what their social economic state is, they get close to $150,000 in equivalent rubles, which if they had three males in the family working, it would exceed what the income of the three males are. So he's bought their silence and their support. He paid attention to what happened in Afghanistan, 10 years of commitment and casualties every single year mounting, so much to the point the people were fed up with it, and it was the people that convinced the Soviet Union leadership to pull out of this thing. So he has cleverly kept this away from Western Russia, from the elites. And while I haven't been in Moscow in a while, the people I know who have been there said, hey, everyday life is the same. There's traffic, the clubs are busy, the restaurants are full, people are having a normal middle-class life experience there, and you wouldn't know a war is going on. So he can sustain this in terms of war-fighting economy and also support from the people. But he does have a couple of problems, and the losses he's taken are significant, Brian. And in 2025, it's going to come to a head, and it's going to force him. I mean, we're talking about almost 30,000 casualties a month. And he's going to have to go to some kind of mobilization. And likely it may have to involve the western part of his country. Mm-hmm. That'll put more pressure on him than he's ever seen. And he's been resisting that. Now, the other thing, his goals in terms of Eastern Europe, the Baltics, certainly Moldova, which is not a part of NATO, which would be easy for him. I'm talking about occupying these countries. He has put more troops on the border of Finland than they have had, going all the way back to the Cold War and to World War II. So, yes, he has a piece of his military that he is not using. And he has not given up his ambitions, not only to take control of Ukraine, but also to take back some of those Eastern European countries that used to be a part of the Soviet Union.
So, Lavrov, if you want to know how serious they are, too, you could just see what they say publicly. Lavrov was evasive on Face the Nation on CBS, but he told a Brazilian newspaper, he insisted that Russia will accept nothing less than total victory over Ukraine. And he said that to Witkoff. They said they want international recognition of Crimea, Sevastopol, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia regions as part of Russia. It's an imperative, insisting that not just the world, but also Kyiv itself recognize that 20% of Ukraine is now sovereign Russian territory. That's a pretty bold statement for somebody who's supposed to be a diplomat.
Yeah, I mean, Lavrov is speaking the truth there. I mean, they still want to control Ukraine, and that's Putin's goal, and you got to know that. And a peace agreement, even if he agreed to a peace agreement, Putin looks at it as temporary, just to appease the Trump team, and he'll rearm. In the meantime, China, certainly Iran and North Korea will assist him. His defense industrial base will recover on its own. The sanctions will be removed, obviously, as opposed to imposing more sanctions, and he'll attack. That's the, and you've got to understand that. When it comes to Crimea, I think the administration is off here. I mean, we all know that Russia occupies Crimea. Should it have happened? Should the Biden administration done something about it? Yes, but that's history. But you got to think of Crimea the way that we thought of East Germany post-World War II. East Germany became part of the Soviet Union, but nobody ever recognized it. No international community recognized that as being an integral part of Russia and the Soviet Union. And the reason for that is because governments change and policies change. So the government changed in 91 as a result of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and East Germany returned to Germany. Crimea is obviously occupied by Russia, just as the Soviet Union occupied East Germany. The government in Russia will change at some point. It may not be the next change, but it could be the following change, that an agreement is reached for reasons that will be of that country's interest at the time, to give up something that is not really theirs and they took illegally. And Ukraine gets back Crimea. We should not recognize Crimea legally as being a part of Russia. Do we understand they occupy it? Yes. Do we understand they're going to occupy it for a number of years? Yes. But it's wrong to think that this is gone forever. History says no. And I think that the right thing to do is obviously just take it off the table and stop even dealing with it, would be the right thing to do, and focus on everything else.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's a diplomatic language that the president's not really, familiar with, because that's not his area. That you could say you could bring this war to an end and don't have to acknowledge that the area that was stolen by the aggressive power is theirs. You could just say we recognize these borders, but you could say you don't recognize the theft of land with using more diplomatic terms, right?
Right, and that's why there's not a single country, to include China, has recognized Crimea being a part of Russia. I mean, the international community kind of gets it. This is occupied territory. That is different than saying it is part of Russia legally. And we didn't do that post-World War II, and I don't think we should do it now. And it's a concession that we just really don't have to make.
Here's what
leave it alone.
So Jennifer Griffin pointed this out on Sunday, that to have Steve Witkoff walk into a meeting with Vladimir Putin by himself without any Russian experts, knowing that he spent Henry Kissinger wouldn't walk in by himself, spending his whole life in diplomacy and writing books about the Soviet Union. Why would he walk in there without Russian experts? And he walks in there, and I don't see anything coming out of this. I mean, do you see any results yet that they're encouraging from your sources?
Well, I mean, what I was told as a result of the numerous meetings that he's had, particularly with Putin, he walks out of those meetings believing Putin, because, I mean, he's a trained KGB operative, experienced in using lies to manipulate people's behavior. This is a skill set that he was trained at and used for years in developing agents. That's who he is. And, we certainly don't have presidents that have that skill set. I mean, and first of all, they try their best to tell the truth, for crying out loud.
Yep.
And that's noticeably different because of our value system. But he's there to manipulate Wickoff and convince him and bend him towards his will. And what I was told, he walks out of there believing what he's hearing. And then what's remarkable, if you just read what his spokespeople are saying and what Lavrov says, that's completely different. They're much closer to telling the truth about what they're really about. And
I know.
Putin, is persuading Wickoff that he's sincere, that he really does want peace. I'm really after the roots of the problem. The roots of the problem is a false narrative. Get this out of people's head, that because these Eastern European countries, who used to be under the communist regime, the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, dominated and put in place governments that were friendly to the Soviet Union in those countries. When that was removed in 91, those countries said to themselves, never again. And let's go to NATO and make certain that we don't have Russia do this to us again. That's what that was all about. It was defensive. There is no offensive capability on those borders to invade Russia. Russia keeps saying, all these countries have become a part of NATO and they're after us and they're the enemy and we have to fight back at them. There is not a country, and certainly not NATO, has any intent
of course
to cross that border and invade Russia. It is done there for defensive reasons against Russia, not offensive reasons. And when you hear people in our government, in our Congress, and saying, well, the roots of this problem is because countries join NATO, and that's what Putin is upset about. Yeah, he's upset about it, but it's false to say that somehow that is threatening him. It is not threatening him at all.
General, it just bothers me. It doesn't bother me when Russians say that. It bothers me when Americans say that. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, I agree.
So lastly, you just educate me on this. I saw Vladimir Putin. Why would he not recognize Donald Trump as his best opportunity for an off-ramp? And does he not understand, with all his KGB training, that if he embarrasses Trump, who has taken political risks and has already taken political hits for giving him an equal chance to stop this war, that he lost his one legitimate ally in the West? Why would he take that risk?
Well, because he thinks he can manipulate our president. And he's trying to go as far as he can until he gets pushed back. The only thing that Putin understands is being pushed back. And that's what he's doing, because he wants concessions. I mean, what are we talking about? He wants to demilitarize Ukraine. He wants to change their constitution. He wants to change their regime. He doesn't want peacekeepers in if there is a peace agreement. He's setting the stage for eventually, if he does go to an agreement, because, as I said, the pressure on him in 2025 will be pretty significant on the battlefield. He wants those concessions first, and he's trying to go as far as he can to get those. He's already got some concessions, obviously, and he wants to get more. And I think that's what he's about. He's gaming us. I think the president is listen. The president knows. He's not going to say it publicly because that's not how he negotiates. He knows Putin's a thug. He knows he's a killer. He knows he's committed genocide. I know that for a fact because I've conversed with him about that subject. But he wants to work with Putin to try to bring him in. I think he knows by now, and he said it publicly, that he thinks Putin is gaming him and he's really stalling. And I think now the options are there for him to take a strong stand about this. I don't know what Wickoff's last session with Putin is about, but I know they're talking about sanctions, and that's appropriate. But sanctions have never moved Putin.
Yep.
What will move Putin is increased military capability to the Ukrainians, not so the Ukrainians can continue to war for 3 more years,
but to be formidable.
To bring Putin to the negotiating table is the objective.
General, thanks so much. On behalf of my audience, you just brought us all down to back to earth and back to reality. General Jack Keane, thank you.